Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching The Right Path. I'm your host Rida Shah. Children are a bundle of joy, and when they grow up, they become the coolness of the parents' eyes. But yet, this journey has several phases, and each phase has its own challenges. I think the most pertinent question to ask in today's time is how to raise your children right, because they're the future, they're the tomorrow, and tomorrow should be full of bright individuals who are optimistic, who are headstrong, and who are indeed compassionate. So today we'll be talking about the importance of raising your children right with Dr. Kaval Kaisar, who happens to be a pediatrician as well. So this discussion will indeed be very fruitful. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahiba, how are you?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
So, Dr. Sahiba, I'm sure you must be very excited for this topic because
Indeed,
you have
yes.
expertise in it, particularly in it. So, like if we start from the very start, your parents, your child is born, it comes to this world. What is the first thing you should do?
The first thing that you should do is thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah has blessed you with a normal healthy baby, irrespective whether it's a boy or girl. Second important thing that we know from the Islamic perspective is that we need to fulfill the rights of the child, like naming the child, giving azan in the ears, doing akika, which is like a celebration of within the first 7 days. And at the very same time, make a plan for the baby from the very start. Like I recall one of the narration in which a lady had a toddler with her and she went to a scholar and she said, I want to raise my kid right, so can you please give me some tips? And the scholar said, you have come too late. So the planning for the baby, in fact, I would say starts way before you even have a baby.
Yes.
So that you groom yourself and you plan for the kid. And that is the time I feel a lot of traits that the parents, they display. They tell me how effective their parenting is going to be when the kid will be like 16 years, 17 years, 20 years. So the decisions that we take at that time should be appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. And you're absolutely right about the fact that the planning should starts before even the baby is conceived.
Yeah.
And both the parents should be on the same page about it as well.
That is very, very important because a lot of time the conflicts in parenting and when the kids, they get messed up is because the father and mother, they don't have the same wavelength, they don't agree on the same challenges, and they don't respect each other's decisions.
Yes, and that is why it is very important to be on the same page,
Yes.
like we said. Now, if we talk about the raising part, when you have a baby and the toddler age is past you, the terrible twos come, and it is very difficult to be patient with the child as well. And then there are several techniques that you adopt while teaching something to your child. For instance, one is reward and punishment. If you do good, you'll get a reward. If you don't, you'll get a punishment. Second is instilling a sense of responsibility within them by telling them what is right and what is wrong. So what is the best approach to it, and how would you guide parents in that regard?
Actually, in our religion, there is no concept of punishment. There is concept of consequences. Whenever, even in Quran, it is mentioned that for this sin, you will get this punishment. So basically, that's the consequence of the choice that you made. So what we need to do is basically discipline our children. And this discipline means that we have an approach where we have clarity on what we want to achieve at the end of the day. A lot of time when the parents, they are telling their kids to do a certain thing or stopping them from something, they are not clear in their own head. I mean, like they're making choices based on what the people are doing, or sometimes when they're happy or they're upset about something. So their yes and no keeps fluctuating.
Yes.
So when we want to discipline children, we have to be clear. Where is it coming from? What is my intention? What do I want my kid to learn? Then we need to understand the age appropriate behavior. At a certain age, how do kids behave? Then we also need to understand from a narration by the Prophet ﷺ where he said, children are born on fitrah, and it is their parents who give them their religion. So they are born on fitrah. They are going to be naturally going to have certain traits. All we need to do is just polish them and flourish them. Like they would always speak the truth. They would always sleep early if we let them sleep early.
Yeah.
They are always early risers. You would notice that. They want something, they are going to be very honest about. When we say they are throwing tantrum, they are basically honest about what they want to do, because later on they learn, okay, I want something, let me pretend that I don't need it and let me hide behind something and still grab it in a manipulative manner. So we teach them all these things. So understanding their age appropriate behavior is important. And then we discipline them. Then
Right.
we tell them what is right and then stop them from what is wrong. The concept that comes in Quran and Sunnah is that is Amar bil Maroof, Nahi Anil Munkar. First you guide them towards what is right.
Right.
And then you tell them what you shouldn't be doing. Usually what we do is there's a small boy holding, or baby child holding a glass of water. The first thing we say is, please don't spill it.
Yeah.
We don't say hold it properly. That is Amar bil Maroof. Someone is rushing down the stairs, we don't say walk nicely or walk cautiously. We just say don't rush.
You'll fall.
You'll fall. So we always start with the negative stuff that is there. Then you need to have set of rules, clarity on the rules, age appropriate rules, realistic goal setting on the rules. Within the family, within the home, like a lot of mothers would come to me complaining, saying that my son or my daughter doesn't give up on the screen time. So when I ask them, have you set some rules related to the screen time? And they would say, yeah, the rules are there, but I don't know how to implement them. The kids don't listen. I tell them you can have your gaming time for like 30 minutes or an hour, but they don't give up for at least 4 hours or so. That means you don't know how to implement the rule, or sometimes your rules are not even realistic. And then we move on that if they break the rules, they don't behave in an age appropriate manner, or they don't get disciplined properly, then we give them a natural consequence of what they have done. We don't punish them. We don't put them on a naughty corner, or we tell them to be just grounded. You can send them to their room telling them that maybe it's time for you to go to your room, analyze what you have done, come back to me and discuss about it.
Yes.
Rather than just saying shut up and I'm the adult and I make decisions for you. So Islam tells us that you give them some consequences. For example, there's a child who has lied to you. So what could be the natural consequence of that? You need to set some standards where they have to earn your trust.
Right.
Okay? So this is something that they have to do. Okay, you gave them pocket money and you told them with clarity that they cannot eat a lot of junk, and you realize that they ate junk. So the natural consequence would be you cut out pocket money for the next week or the month, or you supervise their pocket money when they're spending it. So that's what we say is a consequence of what you did. You did something right, you will be appreciated for that. You did something wrong, so I'm so sorry, there will be a consequence for it.
You have to face the music, like
Yes.
people say. So first step is guidance, and then second step is consequences of your actions. And they necessarily don't have to be bad, because if a child is being responsible with the money, there should also be good consequences for that
The
person.
consequences mean that they realize where they went wrong, and they can change their behavior for future.
Right, right. And now if we talk about the difficult stage, when a child hits puberty, and that is when, you know, there is a whirlwind of emotions going within the person, and they are confused themselves. And mostly I've seen around me, this is a very personal example, parents don't educate their children about puberty, about the changes their body will face. So how important is it to do that?
Rida, I think that's a very, very important area that you're touching upon, that when they are reaching puberty, we need to guide them about halal and haram, what is forbidden and what is allowed in Islam, which includes matters related to tahara, that is cleanliness standard, when to take bath, when you can pray, when you cannot pray.
Exactly.
And parents need to be very confident in talking to children about all these matters. Sometimes mothers, they approach me and they're like, I want to talk to my kid about certain matters, but I feel so shy. So what should I do? So I tell them, if you feel shy, you're not confident about talking to your kid, you can get some good authentic books and tell them to go through those books. If they have certain questions, then you can answer the question. Or else what you can do is take them to some scholars, even some Imam Masjid, and they are going to be very good in guiding those kids about, again, you know, matters related to this tahara and puberty that they must understand. Also, I always tell mothers as well that they need to talk to their kids about the natural attraction they will have for the opposite gender, because nowadays our kids are so closely working with each other on the projects and in workplaces and internship and everything, and there is so much natural attraction over there, and then there is a lot of mess in their life because of these haram relationships, because they don't know how to set their boundaries. So parents can constantly talk to their children and telling them that there is an age which will be appropriate for you to get married. Because ironically what I've seen in society is you talk to any youngster, they don't want to get married. They're like, I have my ambitions and I want to fulfill them. But at the same time, they're hanging out with the boys and girls.
Yes.
And they're having all the fun things in their life. So why are you then hanging out with them? Or why you're running affairs? Or why you are involved in one relationship after another one? So tell them the safety zone, what is safe for you, how you should be behaving with different people, where you set your boundaries, and then giving them this feeling which is there in Surah Luqman, which was a wise man from the Arab culture, and based on his sayings towards his son, the surah says that he says to his son that anything which is as small as mustard seed, it will be visible to Allah. So wherever you are, whether you are in a private life, in your room, you have got your passwords on your laptop, on your screen, and maybe your parents cannot reach them, but Allah knows everything.
Yes, and He's constantly overlooking and overseeing what you're doing.
And especially in our times, for the youngsters, I would say the parents need to be well aware of the technology and the issues and the package that is bringing in. So they must be on Instagram, and I'm not saying when you're on Instagram and Snapchat, your kids will give you full access to their account. Sometimes they have multiple accounts on that.
One is for parents, one is for friends.
But at least you need to be aware of all the challenges over there and keep guiding your children. It's like developing a relationship in which you are giving them small messages, not big time lectures like you sit with them and it's a 30 minutes lecture that you have to attend. Because the kids are going to switch off in that age. So what you have to use is a technique which we say a 30-second technique, in which 10 seconds you talk about something, you explain the consequence of it, and then your expectations related to that topic, and then you move on. And you keep repeating these messages the whole day in many ways.
And that is, I think, effective way of advertising as well, because that is how a message is stuck in our minds. If it's short, it's concise, and it's repeated oftenly as well.
In a pleasant tone.
This is a very, very good technique that you have touched upon. And now I would like to ask you, because we're talking about this, that in today's age, I feel there's a huge gap between the parents and the children, because you know, the millennials, they grew up in a very different environment than their parents. And I feel the grandparents and the parents, they're on the same page when it comes to things. But the children, the new generation, they're very different, right? They even look down upon their parents at times. They're like, okay, things were different when you were young, now things are different, so let me do what is right for me and let me go through life my way. This is the general attitude that surrounds a lot of households. So in light of that, in light of all this, the huge generation gap that we usually talk about, what is the way to get through to your children? Because you have identified a few things, but what is the effective way to actually make them listen to you?
Actually, what we do is we get caught up by this generation gap. Generation gap is always going to be there, because with changing times, things and scenarios are going to be different. And nowadays, the times are of trials and tribulations, when there are more fitnas, there are more challenges that the coming generations are facing. So rather than focusing on this generation gap, what we need to focus on is the skills, which are the universal truth. And they had been there in all generations, from the times of the Prophet. Even in the times of the prophets before the Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they had been there. And what were they? Patience, practicing patience, having anger management, developing the skill of respect, no matter where you are, developing integrity, that is being truthful inside, outside, then working on your relationships, like developing interpersonal communication skills. So these are the things that we need to work on. And at the same time, no matter what kind of trials and generation gap you have, you need to have a strong bonding and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for us as Muslims, the first thing that is there is praying 5 times a day. So that is important. So okay, fine, you live with your generation gap. The parents should not be talking to their kids and saying, oh, in our times we used to have outdoor activities and we used to sit with adults and elders and we used to do this and that. rather than understand their challenges. Because in our times, like I look at my kids and myself and I feel if I was 16 years old and I had this smartphone, I'll be probably doing the same thing that my kids are
Yes.
doing.
Exactly. Very
So,
few people, very few parents realize this.
yes. So that is why it is important that we don't bring in those elements which are annoying for everyone. Yes, we can still talk about, we can narrate our stories. When I was young, we used to do this because we didn't have any mobile, so we used to do this and you can do
Exactly.
that. But at the very same time, teach them skills, focus on the skills like impulsive behaviors, because that is going to help them combat all those challenges that they're facing in these times. Because otherwise there is a generation gap, there are no skills, and then these kids, they're trying to handle everything on their own, thinking our parents will not understand our situations.
Exactly. So the best way is for parents to get acquainted with the latest
Yeah.
technology and be able to understand what their children are going through. Put themselves in their shoes. Basically, that is the most important thing to do. And now, if we talk about parents burdening their children with a lot more that they can carry, because of course parents always have high expectations from their children. They always want them to be the top of their class and get the best job and everything like that, and that is out of love. Of course that is out of love, but that has a lot of adverse effects on the children as well, because then they have to live up to the expectations of their parents. So how would you guide parents to manage their expectations when it comes to children? Because of course not everybody will be the top of the class, right? Not everybody will be good at sports. So there are different types of children, and it's important to identify that.
It is very important. One thing I would advise all the parents is not to make comparisons. Because this is one lesson that we learn when we talk about the Islamic principles. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to assess any one of us based on a comparison. It will be me, my own deeds, my own situation, and how I performed according to my potentials, the knowledge I had, the environment I had. So my test is going to be different from your test. So
Exactly.
because of that, what we need to do is we understand, and that is sometimes natural for the parents to look at some other kid and say, see, he or she is doing it. It could be a sibling, or it could be a cousin, or it could be anyone in the society, and even in the classroom environment. And they start making comparison. So parents need to understand, let me just compare my child's work last year, last month, and what he or she is doing now. So once we make this kind of a healthy comparison, I would say, in which we give them competitive environment based on the skills they have, rather than again bringing in other people, so that there is a lot of jealousy and envy within the kids and they retaliate or they get upset that why my parents are always making such comparison. We also need to understand our kids' temperaments. It is so interesting, we find out in one of the narrations of the Prophet ﷺ, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam and he made him from the clay, so there was clay of different quality and texture and color. So all the people, when they were created with those clays, the different variety of that, that's how they presented themselves in this life. That's the gist of the hadith, that our temperaments, like now the psychologists say, are different. And sometimes parents also get confused or sometimes even marvel over it. They are like, oh, my son is like that, but my daughter is different, or my eldest son is like that and my youngest son is so different. And they keep asking this question, how come when they're raised in the same environment
Exactly.
and they're different? But they have to understand that every kid has a different environment. Like for one thing, the firstborn child, this is your first experience, you are young, your total focus is on the child. If you're educated, you will do a good job. If you are learning at each step, you might have blunders. Then the second child, you have more experience. Now this child also has a sibling. So even the home environment is changed.
Yes.
Okay? So again, the whole dynamics are also changing day by day. And then when these two kids, they go to their for their education to their schools, they are in a different environment, they are interacting with different people, and then they have a different temperament as well. So parents, they need to understand the temperament and the nature of their children, and then pick things which are appropriate for them. If you ask me honestly, that if our focus is main that we want them to be good, believing Muslims, in that process we educate them, we let them have a career choice, we let them choose a partner for themselves for marriage, we let them grow in their character, we will be on a very good road. We will be having clarity in all the decisions. But if we make a choice that, okay, religion it should be their own choice. Let them decide for themselves. Right now, I need to help them have a good career choice because it's a very competitive world.
It is.
Then the kid is going to be totally confused because every day the worldly standards are changing.
Exactly.
And sometimes the kids have a one standard and the parents have another one. So where do you stand then? What do you do with your life? That gets difficult.
It is very important to realize the responsibility that comes with bringing children to this world, and I feel a lot of parents lack in that department because they kind of spread the responsibility out. They're like, okay, the schools, they're going to teach the children a few things, and then okay, it is like that as well, but the sole responsibility is on the parents. This is relevant to our culture, that we instill confidence into our children, but we don't want them to be confident in front of us. We want them to be witty with their responses, but we don't want them to talk back to us, right? And there's this whole sense of respect, and that is a good thing, but I kind of feel sometimes that the element of respect hinders the communication between the parent and a child. So how to bridge that gap?
For that, you need to learn the communication skills, active listening, empathy, and then at the same time learning the art of crucial conversations, because when we are talking to our kids, the parents and the kids, they're talking to each other, so sometimes their opinions are differing, and at the same time their stakes are high because one of them can get upset, and then their emotions, they are also not in so much control, and that's when we mess up. So we need to learn the art of how to have a crucial conversation. When we keep our emotions in place, we have a shared pool of ideas that we exchange. We don't either go in violence or in silence, and then we communicate with each other. We listen to each other's point of view. We don't have to agree. Remember that parents always have a writ. Like, parents have to have a say in the matters of whatever the kids decide for themselves. That is one authority that Islam gives that to the parents. Like, the children, they cannot stand up to the parents and say, oh, I decide for myself. Right. The only place where in a respectful tone they can refuse their parents is when the parents don't want them to practice religion. That's when the only time the parent says, I don't want you to cover yourself, or I don't want you to pray namaz, or I don't want you to go towards religious education. That's the only time they can say, I'm so sorry, I will do this. But again, the tone and everything has to be respectful. Otherwise, in home environment, parents have the say. The authority. Why? Because a lot of things that parents understand, it's like inborn within them. No? So they understand properly for the kids. Maybe kids cannot understand at that time. So if the kids are given equal amount of authority at home, then it will be very chaotic. They will start making premature kind of decisions, and ultimately in the next 10 years or 12 years, they are going to have a lot of repercussions, not only for the kids, but obviously parents, they also start suffering because of that.
That is absolutely true. And this is something that I read somewhere, that some kids are orphan at their own homes. It is because the emotional availability of father is close to zero. They're busy working, and I believe they think that, okay, their job is just to provide the financial end, and the mother's job is to provide the emotional end. But I feel that is not right, because a father has such a crucial role to play in the children's life, right? So what is your take on that regard?
That is absolutely essential for the kids and the parental relationship, that we need to have emotional intelligence. We need to be aware of ourselves. We need to understand when to empathize, when to talk to each other. Basically, by large, as a society, we don't know how to express healthy emotion. Either we are shouting and screaming at people, or we are going in total silence as if I don't care, to hell with everyone. And that is the attitude that the parents have seen all around them when they were growing up. So when they are actually parenting their kids, they are loaded with love for their children, but they don't know how to express it. Like, we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he would laugh, he would touch not only just his own kids and ultimately his grandkids, but also the kids. He would look around in the society, he'll pass by, he'll play with the kids, and he will touch them on the cheek, and he will pat them on the back, he will have jokes with them. So it was like, you know, he will have this pleasant expression on his face when he would be communicating to children. So that is something that we need to learn, because you can be having an authoritative position, but at the very same time, you can have a lot of love that you can shower and a lot of expression that you can have related to whatever you're trying to explain to children. And I've also noticed as a parent, when you express your true feelings, you tell them, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling anxious, I feel little insecure, letting you do this thing or that thing. The kids, they always sit back and think about it. But when you just simply get upset with them or just give them a flat yes or no, that's when the whole load of the emotional burden comes towards the kids, and they are like, my parents don't understand me, or they are not being nice to me, or I don't know how to communicate towards them. So parents' role, and especially father's role, is important in this area, because mothers somehow, they have natural inclination to be emotional in a lot of areas.
Yeah, and I read this somewhere as well, that if you want your children to confide in you, you have to confide in them too.
Yes.
So in that process, you cannot tell all your problems to the children, but you should tell them the reality, some of it, right? Do you think that is the right way, or will it be emotionally damaging to the
No,
children?
it's very important. Sometimes parents are going through like financial challenges, because nowadays with the COVID situation as well, a lot of businesses are down and lots of people are losing their jobs. And sometimes parents, they're taking the whole load and they're trying to give the best to their kids. It is always good to involve the kids. But there is one challenge over here, which I've noticed, is that since our kids are living in their own shells, and they're living this environment where the privacy is so much important for them. It's like privacy about everything. Like they could be putting up on Instagram or Snapchat anything, or on Twitter account that the whole world is reading. But when it comes to their close relationship within the family, they want to be very private. But remember, the kids have to remember, and the parents have to remember, that you deal with all the situations as family. You don't like live in isolation within the family, because that is important. You involve the whole family. Like we find out in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he involved his whole family. When there was a boycott for all the Muslims and the believers, and they had to be in Shebi Abi Talib, like a spot where they lived there for like 3 years, and that was the time his family was with him. And even those family members who were still not believers, but they supported his cause, and they were with him. So they had a lot of hardships, but they went through them together. Why? Because there was a lot of emotional bonding, and they were able to understand each other. So Islam lays a lot of stress on emotional connectivity.
And going through situations as a unit.
Yes.
Because
through
God,
thick and thin.
through thick and thin, and when all ends fail, there's always family.
Yes.
So that is the most important thing to realize. And now if we talk about, like you've mentioned, that educate yourself when you're becoming a parent and everything like that. So are there particular workshops, or are there any particular books that you can recommend to the parents? As I think this is very important, because you know, the internet, it's full of different techniques, and it's full of different rules and regulations, and everything is different for other persons as well. One experience might be very different than the other. So how
Plus it gets very overwhelming for the parents, because sometimes I have noticed myself, when parents come to me for parenting advice and I tell them, read something on this is the topic that you can read, and they say there are like 5,000 articles and I don't know which one to go through.
Exactly.
I would recommend to the parents that the first thing they have to do is become Quran student. Like you can spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes each day, read a verse from Quran, understand, apply it on yourself, then think about how the application would be for your whole family, then how I would teach this concept to my kid, not only within the family, but for his practices outside, when they are going out and interacting with the larger world, when they are meeting all diverse kind of situations and people. Then also look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, what we learn from there. And then look at each individual challenge. The challenge could be coming from your personality, and the challenge could be in your kid's personality, and pick one topic and then you can move on. So once you start reading and you start understanding these aspects, you would come across many experts, many lectures, many forums that you can join. And the more you get involved in these areas, the more you will be educating yourself, and more confident you will be in how to inculcate all these values.
That is indeed absolutely correct, because I feel that parents have to take the burden of, I wouldn't say burden, but have to take the responsibility of molding their children to become good Muslims, to become good citizens, and to become good individuals as well.
Indeed.
On this note, we'll conclude today's transmission. Thank you so much, Dr. Kanwal. It was very insightful, and we had a lot of messages and a lot of takeaways from today's transmission that children, every child has different temperament. Every child is special, original, and individual. So it is very important to realize the potential of each children and treat them the way they need to be treated. So on this note, I'll bid you farewell. Take care. Allah Hafiz.
مولاي صل وسلم دائما